Didn't anybody notice my skeleton?
I saw it.
Yeah.
Pretty lame, huh?
No, it's pretty cool.
Cute.
It's about that time of year.
Yeah, it was a gift, so I'm obliged to put it up. And okay, so now I have a record of it being put up there. Halloween was never my favorite time until I got a little bit older. I always seemed to get to the houses after all the candy was gone. People would come to the door and say, "My wife forgot to buy candy." That was a standard thing in LA. My wife forgot to buy the candy. And if you did get some candy, it was whatever the kids that got there earlier had left over. So it wasn't too terribly exciting at first. I made it exciting a little bit later when I got a little bit too big for trick or treating. At least people would say, "Oh no, you can't have the candy. You're too big." When I was too small, I got the crap. Okay, so there's no win situation. So I went and I got myself an overcoat of my father's, a big old wool overcoat, and I put on a monkey mask, a rubber monkey mask, and then I put a scarf around my head to hide the rest of my head, just the mask itself. And then I put on a straw hat. And then I slouched over and with a bag of candy, I suppose, I would slouch over and walk in a really funny way. If you ever saw the movie, uh, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, uh, where the old Charles Lawton movie. I know that's not your generation. In fact, it's not even my generation. But that guy had this weird humpback and a walk. So I stuffed a pillow in my back to get the hunchback look. And I tell you, I was frightening. I was really frightening. This was not, a Superman costume or we didn't have Spider-Man in those days, but something like that. This wasn't one of those little plastic things that you get these days. This thing was terrible. And I'd go out in the dark and I'd look for likely candidates, kids about my size or a little smaller. Okay, always. And then I'd start picking up the pace and running in a hunchback style with one hand on the ground like an ape. And I'd be grunting and making all sorts of sounds. And as I got close enough to them, I said, "Give me your candy. Give me your candy." They did. They just gave me their candy. And so that was the easy way to collect it. Well,
Charlie.
I got a little too old even for that. And but it was the most effective, efficient way of getting candy. But as I got older, it was more difficult to fit into that costume anyway. So what I did instead, I'd put on some get up, and then I'd go out to the street, look for either a small group like that, two or three. Was ideal, and then I'd toss a cherry bomb at them. And then I'd come running, "Give me your candy, give me your candy." When the cherry bomb would go off, oh, they dropped their candy so fast. That was great. Okay. Anyway, I guess I did enjoy Halloween a bit. Okay, let's go on and get something done here.
Hey, Charlie, real quick.
Yeah, Jaden.
I just wanted to be clear about the outline. So
Yes.
for chapter 12, are we outlining the functional organization of the nervous system or no?
That was at the start, wasn't it? I closed my book. I'm sorry. Do you know what page number it is?
It's on 382, but I think my version's different than yours. But yeah, it's the start of the chapter.
Okay, and give me one of the bold words in there. Chapter heading, paragraph heading. I'm sure we're doing it.
Functions of the nervous system and
Oh
basic
yeah,
functions.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. We got to do that.
Okay. Thank you.
You know, I was thinking before we leave and do our stuff that in getting ahead, as I still feel we are quite far ahead, you're getting material, you know, that is not on the next test. Your next test is lecture test 2, and I've written to you and told you what's going to be on lecture test 2. Okay, so if you have any questions, you can either do them here or you can write me if you're confused. Okay, if it's not on that list, it's not going to be on lecture test 2. I'll save it for P3 or uh, lecture test 3, and you'll know ahead of time when that's coming. But it occurs to me that, you know, with extra material that we've got floating around since we're getting ahead, that when you log off, what should you be studying? You should be studying for L2. You should go back and study for L2. Okay, take this, what we're talking about today, as our introduction, if you will, because I'm sure we're going to have time to go over it again. In fact, the nervous system always gets 2 hits. People, some people catch on quickly, but most people have a little bit of trouble with it until they've heard it the second time, and then almost nobody has any trouble with it. Okay, you know, it's one of those things we don't understand. We don't know how the brain works. We don't know how nerves really work. So we have to sort of take it on faith. So I'm telling you that if you're going to devote time to study this week, you're going to devote it to L2. I'm going to provide you with at least 1, probably 2 or 3 practice tests that'll come on Friday or Saturday morning. Okay. As far as doing those tests and turning them in for Monday night, I will accept that you've done the test if you just do 1. Okay, you definitely want to do all 3. Okay, but I don't want to collect a whole bunch of stuff. Okay, I just want to know that you're keeping up. So you're going to get a practice test, and I think you'll benefit from it. Okay, here we go. I don't want the camera. You know, when I get, do you see this screen? You don't see the screen that I'm looking at.
No.
You
No.
just see the black and white letters.
We just see you.
Oh, okay. You don't see what I'm looking at. You know, I go to the main screen, and then I always log in again. And I was hoping there's a shortcut to that, but I can call IT if there is one. They'll tell me. Okay. So what I'm doing now, and you can't see, is I'm logging in again. And now you should be able to see the 3 guys. Huh?
Yep.
Okay. You know, I figured out why I don't like the 3 guys. This guy is at the start of the class. And this guy is at the end of the class, gone to sleep. This guy is somewhere in between, falling forward. Okay. I got to change that picture. Okay. We go to the modules. I reduced, as I said, some of them. And here's where we started on Tuesday, nervous tissue. Okay. And here's where we are today. We're going to begin to talk about the autonomic nervous system. Almost nobody understands the autonomic nervous system the first time through. Don't be concerned. You just want to get that first time through under your belt, and we'll be coming back to it. Okay. There's Tuesday's recording, of course. Okay. Come on, let me have that. Okay. Right off the bat, it says it's suggested. Well, I'm suggesting that you use chapter 12 as you read this material. Have the book open. Don't just read this, then go get the book. Get them side by side if you can. And we'll talk a little bit about the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system it's fairly easy to understand on paper. But let me back up to this diagram that you just saw in the book. I went over this diagram, but it was in text form. Well, this is too, but it's a different text form. Here's the central nervous system sort of grayed out. That's the brain and the spinal cord. Everything else in this, I believe, tan color, okay, everything else is peripheral nervous system. Okay, we have central nervous system and then the peripheral nervous system. On the first diagram that we looked at on Tuesday, the word peripheral nervous system wasn't spelled out. I sort of bracketed it. Okay, we'll start here. Somatic sensory. Somatic means of the body. Sensory means sensations. So here we're talking about heat, vibration, pressure, pain, touch, anything that's associated with the skin especially. And we get that information coming in. We mentioned that, okay? And it comes in by means of the afferent division, the afferent nervous system. Afferent meaning incoming, loving, and now there is no just peripheral nervous system where I've stopped right now. That's the whole category. And then from there, the afferent impulse or stimulus goes to the central nervous system and back out. And then it goes to the efferent nervous system or efferent division, as they're calling it here. Efferent means like to effervesce, to go away, to come away from. Okay. And then the motor command, the command to do something, gets sectioned into the somatic nervous system, which is always going to the skeletal muscle. So we took heat from over here, took it to the brain. Brain said, "Get out of there," and you get out of there through the skeletal muscle. So you go to the somatic nervous system. On the other hand, the motor command may go to the body, to the organs internal to the body, and it may go to smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, or glandular epithelium. And this is the autonomic nervous system. This is what we want to sort of concentrate on today, just this portion. The autonomic nervous system has two opposing parts, the sympathetic division and the parasympathetic division. Nothing to say about that right now. In a few minutes, we will. We left one thing out right over here, visceral sensory. Didn't mention it on Tuesday either. Your organs, we did mention it with the stomach. Your organs also send signals by means of the afferent nervous system. Okay, and they reach the brain and spinal cord. Your organs are constantly telling the brain and spinal cord how they're doing. They're doing well. They're not doing well. The pH is wrong down here. There's too much nitrogen in the urine. all sorts of parameters. Well, that's coming from the organs, that's visceral sensory. It follows the same track up, goes to the brain, comes back. And if it's visceral sensory, where do we think it's going to be affected by? The somatic nervous system or the autonomic nervous system? Hope you picked autonomic nervous system. Okay. Autonomic nervous system will react to that visceral sensory input. Notice when you do this page, the blue line, I believe it's blue, okay, and arrows, that's indication of the afferent division. The efferent division is whatever color this is. Is that green or red?
More
Red.
purple.
Purple? Okay. I flunked the draft physical many, many years ago because I was colorblind. Okay. Couldn't see any of the colors. The autonomic nervous system, that's what ANS stands for, top of the page. It's a subdivision of the peripheral nervous system, okay? And it innervates, a term meaning has action on smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, and the glandular epithelium. The hypothalamus, if you can recall when we looked at the brain, and we're going to be seeing that again, okay? When we looked at the brain, we pointed out the hypothalamus underneath the thalamus. And that's the part of the brain that controls, it seems, and I say it seems because nothing's for sure yet, it controls the autonomic nervous system. It's broken into two sections. The ANS is broken into the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. This is a generalization here. In the sympathetic nervous system, the motor commands that come to it, okay, the motor commands that come to it from the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system generally prepare the body for what we call fight or flight. You gotta stand and fight or run away. It's protective for the most part. And that does not mean that if you're in a calm situation, the sympathetic nervous system doesn't have anything to do. It does. It does have its job in every organ of the body. Every organ of the body is innervated by the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. But when it gets a special attention, special commands, it will prepare the body to run or to stand and to fight. Whereas the parasympathetic system dominates in less stressful times. It actually prepares the body for rest and growth. Both of these systems, sympathetic and parasympathetic, okay, and we are going to have a diagram for it, they are functional all of the time. It's just to what degree they're functional, and especially to what degree the fight or flight half, the sympathetic nervous system, is functional. Your body has control of the autonomic nervous system. You don't. Okay, not really. Okay. On the other hand, to take an exception to that statement, can you get your sympathetic nervous system going? Can you frighten yourself? Can you just think of something that always frightens you? Want me to show you that skeleton again? So most people have something that gets them uptight. Okay, I actually think everybody does. There's a portion here in italics, And that just warns you to please read chapter 12 as you go through this. There's nothing in that. Okay, the autonomic nervous system comes from the central nervous system. Back up. Here's the central nervous system. And we go back out to the autonomic nervous system. And the autonomic nervous system here splits to sympathetic and parasympathetic. Okay, when it splits, there will be two neurons that take the motor impulse of the autonomic nervous system to the organs that are innervated sympathetically or parasympathetically. There are always two neurons. Oh, there's plenty of neurons we've just bypassed up here in the brain and going in this direction as well. But when we generate a parasympathetic impulse or a sympathetic impulse and send it to the organs of the body, it'll always reach the organ after using two neurons. Here would be an example of a two neuron set. Okay. Here's the cell body. The action potential is another name for impulse, is going in this direction. These little fingers at the end are the axon branches, also known as the teleodendria. And they touch a dendrite of a second neuron. When they touch the dendrite, they'll stimulate it. And if enough of these are stimulated, the axon hillock will fire and a new action potential continues on. Then we get to the other end, and this is at the end of the two neuron pathway. What's this going to touch? Another neuron? No, because that would be three neurons. This is going to touch the organ itself. This is going to touch the wall of the stomach, the smooth muscle of the stomach, or the liver, or any other thing that you can think of inside of your body. Where the first and second neuron come together, whether or not we're talking about autonomic nervous system or the rest of the peripheral nervous system, or even the central nervous system, where two neurons come together, there's a gap. It's called a synapse. Okay. The definition and a picture of the synapse is on Tuesday's material. It's at the very end. Nice picture. Here's a synapse. Before you get to the synapse, since we're coming in this way, this neuron is called the presynaptic neuron. They're saying presynaptic cell. I prefer to call it myself. Presynaptic neuron means the same thing. After the synapse is passed, the second neuron is the postsynaptic neuron, or in the case of the drawing, the postsynaptic cell. This will be hard without a drawing, but we'll get to one very soon. This cell body of the presynaptic neuron, both of these belong to the autonomic nervous system. But this cell body is located in the horns of the gray matter in the cross section that we looked at of the vertebra, cross section of the spinal cord. This is not a part of the spinal cord. If it were a part of the spinal cord, it would be in the central nervous system. But this cell body of this presynaptic neuron, okay, also known as I'll hit you that in a moment. This is actually embedded in the spinal cord, but not a part of it. Okay. You can imagine punching a big gigantic cube of jello, and just because your hand fist or inside the jello, you're not jello. Okay? That's the same thing here. This is inside of the spinal cord. Here's the synapse. Synapse refers to this little space here. It's a physical space. You've got two neurons, the first one, the second, the presynaptic and the postsynaptic. The diagram has a few things we don't need, but it does have things we do. Inside of this portion here, where I'm moving around, of the presynaptic neuron or cell, these are synaptic vesicles. There's one, there, there. Unfortunately, they didn't choose to label this. I can label it for you. These are presynaptic vesicles. And what do they hold? When they open up, they release neurotransmitter, a chemical. The chemical is usually acetylcholine or norepinephrine. This neurotransmitter now makes its way across this small gap, but it's going to do it by diffusion. No membrane in here. And when it gets to the other side, it will depolarize or excite the dendrite of the postsynaptic cell. Whether or not the neurotransmitter is acetylcholine, which reacts slowly and weakly, or norepinephrine, which is also called adrenaline, and you can imagine then it acts with great force. Okay. Depends on where we are in the body. Now, these enzymes, don't pay attention to them other than what I'm going to tell you. The enzymes are there to break down the neurotransmitter. We can't have the neurotransmitter floating around in here forever. We'd never be able to turn the action off. So some of the neurotransmitter is released, okay, and then makes it across, excites the dendrite on the other side, and eventually it's decomposed by the enzyme. What's the structure here? Well, they did label it. This is the axon. This is here, the axon branch or the teleodendrion. These are the ones that have the synaptic vesicles. They're preformed, they're in there. If you get muscle fatigue or sensory fatigue, looking at something over at the same time, over and over and over, and you're getting the same stimulus, you can essentially wear out the synaptic vesicles. There won't be enough left, and so then the stimulus stops, and you essentially could go blind for a small period of time until they were regenerated. Now I want to introduce the term ganglion. Okay. Whereas a neuron is a single cell in the nervous system, a nerve, we said the other day, is a cable, a collection of neurons. If they run in the same direction, they are redundant. They all do the same thing, which is helpful because if one gets damaged, no harm is really done. There's plenty more to take over. If they run towards the central nervous system, it's an afferent nerve, otherwise known as the sensory nerve. If the collection of neurons forming a nerve runs in the opposite direction, out towards the motor area, it's an efferent nerve, or it's a motor nerve. And if they run side by side in the same cord-like structure, we have most of our nerves being mixed nerves. One part of it runs one way and the other is running the opposite way. You've all seen ants running around. You've all seen trails of ants, and half of them are going north and the other half are going south. And that's the sort of same situation here. Now, when we look at a neuron, just a single neuron, the cell body is larger than the rest of the neuron. Cell body here is larger. If I have two cell bodies here, because I have two neurons running side by side, I'm going to start getting a larger bump. If I have three, if I have a dozen, if I have 100 cell bodies, and they're all starting from here, and then out come the axons from them, I'm going to end up with quite a mass. Well, this is exactly what happens in the pseudo-unipolar neurons that come from the skin. Okay, where my pointer is, incoming or afferent sensations or stimuli come in here, and they enter into the dorsal horn. But the nuclei and the cell body are here. Okay, the pseudo unipolar has one side here. Here's the cell body, and then the rest of it continues on. Well, if you've got hundreds and hundreds of these, you're going to have a large collection of cell bodies, or perikaryon, the other name for it. And you get a mass or a swelling. It's especially noticeable in the vertebra that we looked at. Now, there's no vertebra here because there's no bone here. There's only spinal cord and these as yet unstudied nerves. This is called the dorsal root ganglion, because this is the dorsal root pathway. Back here, incoming stimuli always enter through the dorsal side. But the nuclei are left outside. It's probably for a good reason. There's probably no room to stash all those nuclei in here. So leave them outside. And dorsal root ganglion, always on looking at a model, tells you which is the dorsal side, because you don't have a ventral root ganglion. You don't have a ventral root ganglion over here. This little drawing is really a reflex arc. The information comes in, immediately transfers to the other side, and goes out without actually, in our scheme here, going up to the brain or the spinal cord. It's in the spinal cord, and it has reached the central nervous system, but it doesn't go up to the brain right away. Instead, in a situation where you're in danger, like for instance, touching a hot stove, you pull your hand back immediately without thinking of it. And that's because you have this reflex arc. It immediately goes back and says you did something stupid. Okay. Now that doesn't mean that the information doesn't also go up to reach the brain, and the brain comes back down. But by the time the brain gets back down, all it can do is say, yeah, you did do something stupid. Okay. This top drawing here, if you use my example of coming in, bringing a stimulus in, and taking a motor command out, that's probably just going to be going to the skeletal muscle. Okay, it's really part of the voluntary nervous system. When we look at the involuntary nervous system, the other name for the autonomic nervous system, this will not be the pathway. Okay. So this is the one we talked about before yesterday, and pretty simple. But when we get to the sympathetic nervous system, this one's also called the thoracolumbar system because all of its preganglionic neurons. Now we use the term up here, presynaptic. Okay, a ganglion is a bunch of synapses at the same spot. They'll always be around a cell body as well. A ganglion is a group of neural synapses located in the peripheral nervous system. Now, no time to write that down yet. I'll get it enough times, but it's in the notes from Tuesday. The sympathetic nervous system, I'm back down to here, is also called the thoracolumbar system. Sympathetic, that's fight or flight. Two neuron pathways to get to the organs, to get the organs excited. The first neuron originates or emerges from the thoracic and lumbar vertebra, and only those. We have a diagram for that in just a second. That's why they're called thoracolumbar. Okay. Here's our base of the brain. Cervical vertebra has nothing to do with the autonomic nervous system. But the 12 vertebra, there are 12 in here, and the 5 lumbar vertebra, 12 thoracic and 5 lumbar vertebra, they each initiate the preganglionic. I'm using the word preganglionic. You can also use the word presynaptic neuron. Here it comes out, and it goes here. Each one of them goes to what looks like a little nodule. This is these nodules are collectively called the chain ganglia. And a second neuron, the postganglionic neuron, comes out. The preganglionic neuron, anywhere down here, is relatively short, even if this drawing doesn't exaggerate enough. It's short, and the postganglionic neuron is long. They synapse here in the chain ganglia, chain because on 1 inch on either side of your vertebral column, that's where these are located. You get somebody to rub your back and they do a good job right there. Usually feels pretty good. Now, before you think that it's just a straight pathway, this preganglionic to a ganglion to postganglionic. It's not just that easy. Okay. You can take a preganglionic neuron like this one, and now instead of synapsing and going right to the lungs, which is where I had it going, it instead can go up or down. And it can synapse here and then go on out to the stomach. What use is that? Because these are not just neurons, these are nerves. and they splinter into thousands of smaller nerves. Okay, they're running together. Collections of neurons are nerves. So this preganglionic neuron should be actually called preganglionic nerve. And now it can split. It can go straight ahead to the lungs. It can go up. It can go down. It can go down and come back up again. It's getting on an elevator. You push the buttons. And you think of that kid that pushed all the buttons just before he ran out the door. Okay, you're going for a ride. And where you get off when the door opens up. What's the advantage of that? Well, you have a lot of redundancy. And when a command comes from the brain that says, get ready to run, there's trouble. Okay, get the whole body primed, shut down digestion. We don't need that. Everything happens at once. Well, here comes the information, and it goes down the entire spinal cord. Okay, or even before it gets to the bottom, it starts going out. And as it goes out, it goes up and down and reaches all the organs multiple times, so that this fight or flight system, the sympathetic nervous system, is capable of coming alive, just really alive, and getting all the organs primed from this side. Now the text here says, notice that the preganglionic neurons that emerge from thoracic and lumbar. You remember the sacrum? You remember the 4 holes on each side of the sacrum and the sacral hiatus as well? Those are places where these nerves emerge in the lumbar region, even though your spinal cord doesn't go down that far. Your spinal cord does not go down to the coccygeal region. It only reaches to L2. But that doesn't matter. The spinal cord at L2 initiates a preganglionic sympathetic impulses and sends them on several tracks, and they come out through those openings in the sacrum. So we still count all of them, all 5 of them, all 5 of the lumbar vertebra and 12 of the thoracic. Here's the other side over here. Everything on the left-hand side refers to the sympathetic system. Everything on the right-hand side is the parasympathetic system. I have a little chart to compare. In the sympathetic system, it's also known as the thoracolumbar system. Pardon me for repeating now. The nerves originate from the spinal cord and thoracic and lumbar regions. In the parasympathetic system, however, it's also known as the craniosacral system, because the nerves arise from the brain and from the sacrum. How do they get out of the brain? How do these nerves get out of the brain? Through the foramen magnum, from the foramen magnum. Okay. So now we look down here, and this is the parasympathetic side, and all of these preganglionic neurons are coming out of the brain, and these are coming out of the sacrum. Okay. Take a look at the difference. This is the preganglionic neuron. I'm following 1. Let's go to the top of the stomach. Okay. And here's its synapse. The postganglionic neurons or the ganglionic cell is short. It's opposite. You have a long preganglionic and a very short postganglionic neuron in the parasympathetic system. Does it have to be that way? I couldn't answer that for, no matter how long you gave me to look up the answer. No, I'd have to say, no, it doesn't have to be that way. That's just the way it is. Okay. On the sympathetic side, you need to remember preganglionic neurons are short, postganglionic neurons are longer. And on the parasympathetic side, the preganglionic neurons are long, they synapse, and then you have the postganglionic neuron is short. Short run right here, right here, right here. Short run only to the organ. Well, a schematic way of looking at it is this. In the sympathetic system, the first neuron is short. There's a synapse, and the second neuron is long. Okay. In the parasympathetic, the first neuron, preganglionic, is long, and the postganglionic is short. These abbreviations refer to the neurotransmitter that's in there. At the synapse or at the ganglion, it's a synapse if there's only one. It's a ganglion if there's more than one. Well, it's almost always going to be more than one. We have to have neurotransmitter to go across. And the neurotransmitter in the sympathetic system between the pre and post ganglionic neurons is acetylcholine. That's the abbreviation for acetylcholine. It's written out down here. Look at the parasympathetic system. The synapse it has between the two neurons is also mediated by acetylcholine. We said acetylcholine is kind of a slow one. Okay, we'll go back up to the sympathetic. Now that you've initiated the post-ganglionic stimulus, we go here, and here's the organ. And the neurotransmitter here is noradrenaline. Noradrenaline. Here's the abbreviation. Here it is down here. That will work with great force, fast, and we'd expect the sympathetic system to be more responsive time-wise. In the parasympathetic system, it is acetylcholine again. It never speeds up. The sympathetic system, parasympathetic system, contrasting the two. We did that first column. Generally, the sympathetic system excites and prepares for fight or flight. Well, we said that. And the parasympathetic system dominates in less tense situations. Both systems are active at both times. Another comparison. In the sympathetic system, sympathetic nervous system, the preganglionic neuron is short and terminates in the chain ganglia. Postganglionic neuron is comparatively long. And we also said this about the parasympathetic. The preganglionic neuron is long and may terminate in a ganglion near the organ innervated. The sympathetic nervous system is said to be adrenergic. That refers to the fact that one of its neurotransmitters is adrenaline or noradrenaline. The parasympathetic system is entirely cholinergic. By that, entirely cholinergic means that all of the neurotransmitter is acetylcholine. So this chart isn't difficult. It just summarizes everything that's said actually partially before it and after it. I'm providing you with some self-study material. And you don't need to refer to it now. We're not going to talk about it now. These are the cranial nerves. The 12 cranial nerves by name, what their sensory function is, and then what their motor function is. The first one, for instance, Roman numeral 1, is the olfactory nerve or olfactory bulb. Its sensory function is, of course, smell. And does it have any motor function? Not at all. So there's a dash there. You'll need to know these 12 and whether they have a sensory and no motor, a sensory and a motor, or sometimes only a motor function. In other words, you need to know this chart. So many people, it's amazing to me, have never learned Roman numerals. I hate them too. D's and M's and C's. I know what some of them stand for, but we all should know the first 12 because we see them on old clocks lots of times. So you'll need to be able to identify these named cranial nerves by their Roman numeral as well. Okay. Not an Arabic 6 or something like that. Okay, let me give you 10 minutes and then I'll quickly go through the lab portion for today, which is the vessels below the diaphragm. I think if you recall from Tuesday, it really didn't take us long to do the vessels above the diaphragm. I'll do the vessels below the diaphragm, and then I'll offer you a review on our material for L2, and today's review would be on the urinary system, okay? And you can stay for that or not. But right now, I'm going to give you a 10-minute break till 3:20. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, I just said let's rock and roll.
Okay.
Charlie, I have a question.
Okay, Anto.
The ones that you were mentioning a while ago for the heart structures and labeling, that's part of the lecture exam too?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Okay. And then the vessels or the white blood cells or whatever?
That's in a lecture. It's actually in, all of my lecture material, I put the word lecture after it. You know that, I'm sure. And I put lab after it if it's strictly lab material. There are some things that cross the line. The heart's probably the major one. You need to know the heart, the way it looks, okay? Be able to identify the different valves, all the structures uh, that are there. If you're uncertain about it, you can actually just email me, and that'll generate an email from me to everybody to be sure that everybody knows what is going to be there. Okay, but we spent a lot of time on that thing. Okay, when I do the heart lecture in face-to-face in the classroom, I do a regular lecture, whatever it is for the day, and then we go over, we have to switch rooms, we go over to the lab room, and then I put that drawing on the board of a heart. I tell the class, this is fair game for everything, and it will be on the lecture test as well. Now, let me get signed in so I can show you something. You're not seeing this, are you? A circle? No.
I can see that.
You can?
Yeah.
Can you see week 8 increasing and decreasing?
Yeah.
Okay, then I don't have to do all that signing in. That was great. That saves a bunch of time. I don't want to leave this though. Okay, here's our homepage website. Some of you have forgotten to take a look at this, but it has a lot of the material that you're going to need. And here, under the heart, okay, unit 3, that's getting ready for P3 really, but there is a diagram. This is a board diagram, chalk diagram, okay, with everything labeled from the days when we used to have chalkboards. Okay. And then the heart itself, here's the material that I've given to you. And review PowerPoints are down here. They aren't for L2 at all. They're for P3 when we get there. I gave you white blood cells in the lecture. I gave you, if you recall, elastic artery, muscular artery. I gave you arterial, capillary, venule, vein, vena cava. Okay, so you'll find that under the lecture material. Okay. Let's go back. Okay. I'm in week 10, and that's where we are. And here are the vessels below the diaphragm. Now, again, so much effort in the past has gone into making photographs and things, which you haven't seen yet, with the cat, that it'd be a shame not to use that. And as it turns out, the cat anatomy, the vessels or circulatory system, is almost identical. There's just a couple of places, which I of course point out to you, where it is different. And I have plenty of good pictures for that. There are some human models, plastic models that are actually on a flat board. I call them the flat man models. And we use those as well. So you'll be getting the human side of it as well, but it's not different. It's not really different. So if you recall these in their proper places, you'll have it down for the human models when they get asked for you. Okay, so here are the veins. Here's the diaphragm. We're only going to do the veins and arteries below the diaphragm. Coming down from the inferior vena cava that's up in the thoracic region, here's the inferior vena cava. Here's the inferior vena cava. The natural run when you look at a human or a cat is to go from the diaphragm to where it splits down here and learn everything in between first. Well, that's not going to be hard. We're going to find a kidney over here. We're going to find a kidney over here. Nobody mistakes a kidney. When you see it in the diagram and you see it in the photographs that we have, you're not going to be surprised at all. The large vein that's actually coming out of the kidney is the renal. Here's the right and left renal veins. Just above that, there's a small pea-sized organ, the suprarenal gland, or we also call it the adrenal gland, and a vessel that goes into it is actually coming out of it. This is the suprarenal vein. The nice thing about the veins when we have an injected specimen is the veins are colored blue. I see blue very nicely. Okay, sometimes I can't find the red ones, but there's plenty of those to see as well. But you can easily spot the suprarenal. Goes right across the middle of the small little suprarenal gland. Think of a small pea. For those of you who know black-eyed peas, for instance, or any small pea, not as big as a kidney, just a small little tiny pea, like in a split pea soup, but put the two parts together. This will go right across the middle of it. Suprarenal, renal. The next two is this pair, and they're not opposite each other. This is a gonadal. This is either going to the ovaries or testes, depending upon whether you have a male or female cat. The right gonadal here, and on this side, joining the renal on the left side, this is the left gonadal. This is the most common placement of the left gonadal. Now, occasionally, nature fools us, and this does not actually occur here. It does occur here, opposite the right gonadal. Well, I'm not going to play any games with you. Don't worry about that. If I show it to you, it'll be right over here, like the drawing has it. Come on down and get here to the waist. And there is a 90-degree angle. Perfect. And then it sort of pitchforks at the end. This is the iliolumbar vein, the left one, and the right iliolumbar vein. When you find the iliolumbar vein, you will immediately find the iliolumbar artery because they run right together. They're right beside each other. It's like a piece of yarn that one side is blue and one side is red. So in a moment, we'll be able to skip iliolumbar artery. We're probably going to be able to skip renal artery. This is a renal vein, okay, and it's coming this way, but being red or pink going the other way, right next to it, we can find the renal artery as well. And if we're lucky and spot a red vessel, it'll run right next to the suprarenal vein. It's the suprarenal artery. So we double dip on a lot of these, which is nice. Now we split here. Where are we? Well, obviously there's a leg here and a leg on this side. But look here. This is a bowl. This is a bowl. Think of a mixing bowl. Even the guys, well, a lot of guys cook. But it goes down. Going around the lip of the bowl is this. But going down into the bowl, like icing or cake mix, dripping downward, are these. This one almost in the middle. Often it's off to the right side. This is the right side. This is the mid-sacral vein. Sometimes we have to even take a flashlight to look into this bowl and move things around. But it's easy to do, and we have pictures of it anyway. This goes to the tail. Do we have a mid-sacral vein then? Yes, we do. We have a mid-sacral vein. Some people are, probably they never knew it. Some people are born with tails. And I'm talking about significant little tails. And the doctors, well, I only knew one that would tell me this, but he said, we clip that thing off just as fast as we can because we'll be blamed for it no matter what. We'll get sued. So we could just clip that thing off. Okay. This is the midsacral. Coming along here, this is the common iliac vein. This is the common iliac vein. The thick part, as it first diverges. The word common means that something is going to split again, and each part's going to have a similar name. Or the word common means that it has come together. Remember the cystic duct and the hepatic duct come together? They made the common bile duct. Okay. Well, this common iliac vein is going to split, and part of it's going to run down the side here, okay, into the pelvic cavity. And this is an internal iliac vein. Going forward is the external iliac vein. And then coming off of it and starting its route around the top of the bowl is the deep femoral. The deep femoral never makes it. I've never seen it make it anyway. It's like a belt that is just too small. So if you're trying to tighten the belt, not going to be able to. This is the deep femoral. Now, at this point, you'll leave the body. Here is the body wall. Okay. But now we're punching out into the leg. And this first vessel is the femoral vein. And it splits. One part goes behind the knee, and that's the popliteal. Sometimes we don't find that. It's such a large vessel when we do, but sometimes it's difficult to spot. The one that goes all the way down to the ankle is the great saphenous vein. Great saphenous vein. You want to look at these, get them so that they match up with the text here. There's nothing here that I can say. And then see if you can label it. Making as many copies as you need of this till you get it right. On the test, you are not going to be labeling a diagram like this. Okay. This is your roadmap when you look at a photograph. Okay, and we will look at plenty of photographs. Below the diaphragm, we have the arteries. You can read the text. We see the same basic outline here. We see the diaphragm at the top. We see a large vessel coming down and then splitting. Okay, the large vessel coming down is the abdominal aorta. Prior to its piercing the diaphragm, it was the thoracic aorta, or the descending thoracic aorta. Let's do the easy part first. It always makes sense to. We're going to come down, and I'm going to find the renal artery. It'll be right next to the renal vein that I just found. Come up above it and check the suprarenal vein and see if there's an artery running next to it. If there is not, skip it. Because sometimes it just does not inject perfectly. We need to know one or the other. Recall that I told you on this test, you don't have to say right or left, artery or vein. Okay. Now, going down farther, not labeled. This is the gonadal on the right side. It's actually can be called the ovarian or testicular artery if you know that you have a male or female cat. The safe thing to do is just call it the gonadal artery. Now, you remember in the veins, the gonadal vein on the left side entered here at the renal. Okay. And I said occasionally it does this. Well, with the arteries, it always does this. Come down farther. Here's that 90-degree turn right next to the iliolumbar vein that we just found. This is a freaky looking vessel, but it's easy to spot, easy to spot. So you'll find the iliolumbar artery and vein at the same time. And now then we need to go back up and name the rest of the things that are here. As the thoracic aorta punches through the diaphragm, it becomes the abdominal aorta. The first thing it does is branch once, twice. The first branch is the celiac or celiac trunk or celiac artery. Celiac's the main term to get out of that. Okay. The second one is the superior mesenteric. The celiac subdivides into the splenic, gastric, and hepatic. And you can only imagine where these arteries are going then. This is going to the spleen. This is going to the stomach. This is going to the liver. Okay. But it comes from one trunk called the celiac trunk. The next one is the superior mesenteric. And if we were able to follow it out farther here, and we will with a photograph, we bring it out farther and it goes to the mesenteries proper. It goes to the small intestine. Okay. And it takes blood to the small intestine. The small intestine delivers blood backwards to the liver through the hepatic portal system, but the small intestine has to have its own blood supply too. These two, the superior mesenteric and celiac, if it were drawn a little bit better, would form a V, the letter V, or peace symbol, or they're really easy to spot. In fact, when I'm in face-to-face class and somebody says I can't find it, and I know that they have made a good try, then I say it's not there. By it's not there, I mean it's not injected well enough for you to see, because these are very, very distinct vessels. Okay, we did these two. We did that one. We only have this one left. This one occurs between the iliolumbar and the gonadal. And this one comes out and goes to the colon. It's the inferior mesenteric. It goes to the colon, takes blood to the large intestine. So superior mesenteric goes to small intestine. Inferior mesenteric goes to large intestine. Come down farther. Here we get a split. We don't have a common iliac artery. There is no common iliac artery in the cat. In humans, there is, and in humans, the situation would be like in the last drawing. Okay, I'll be sure to show you that using a torso model. But let's just follow where this goes. This one goes straight out. This has got to be the mid-sacral again. Okay, following the little tiny piece of still aorta, then it splits into the internal iliacs. The internal iliacs in the veins came off of here. It's a little slight difference. Here's the internal iliac. Here's the external iliac. And it runs this external iliac artery until it diverges away as the deep femoral artery. The deep femoral artery and the deep femoral vein are kind of messy. They never preserve in a nice cord-like fashion. They always seem to be a little bit squashed. After we pass the deep femoral, we hit the femoral artery. Very easy to find. Okay. Now, of course, you're not going to go after we finish here and try to find it. You could, if you wanted to, you could go to the website that I showed you a moment ago and look through the PowerPoints for Unit 3. But that would be getting ahead. And you got L2 to be most concerned about. Okay, here's the popliteal. And instead of calling it the great saphenous, we call it the saphenous artery. Okay, now at this point, I'm going to switch to a quick review of the urinary system in trying to prepare you or refresh your memory back as far as 929, almost a month ago, when we did the urinary system. If you don't feel you need to stay for it, if you feel that you can read the lecture yourself again and you had no trouble understanding it the first time, it's your choice. You be my guest, be your guest. Either stay or don't. Okay. And if you don't, well, then have a good weekend and do look for the practice quiz Friday or Saturday. Okay. Okay. Urinary system functions, there they are. I mean, if I just read them to you, I wouldn't be doing very much, but it's elimination of waste, storage of bladder, maintenance of the salt content of the body, maintenance of blood pressure, largely because of the maintenance of the salt content of the body, and general maintenance of homeostasis. We talked about that term just yesterday. Now, be sure that if you want to interject, you want to ask a question or something, you just blurt it out. That's fine. Okay. I don't see anything here but this page. The components: 2 kidneys and 2 ureters, the urinary bladder, and the urethra. The kidneys completely retroperitoneal. The ureters partially retroperitoneal. Very important term. Retroperitoneal means not in the peritoneum, but behind the parietal peritoneum. They're behind the peritoneum and up against the muscular wall. They are not in the abdominal cavity, which means the likelihood for infection or something like that is decreased in an operation to transplant, for instance, a kidney, if you go in through the back instead of going in through the abdominal area. The ureters will punch out and deliver the urine to the bladder, but they have to punch through the parietal peritoneum. Okay? And that means they have to come out at some point. Well, they do come out, but the connective tissue where they come through and enter into the abdomen, the connective tissue is such that it seals up any area there, and there's no way that anything enters from the abdomen back into the area that we call retroperitoneal. The bladder is lined with rugae. Rugae is an important term here because it's a fold that allows for distension in this case, In the digestive system, rugae allowed for increase of surface area. Okay, I give you a little warning here to look at the book as you do this, and also look at the diagrams. These are all the terms. I'm going to skip the terms for right now and go to the picture, and then we come back and see that we hit all of the terms. Okay. The exit from the kidney is the ureter, and that carries, of course, urine. There'll be no further action on the fluid once it gets into there. Working backwards, coming from the kidney, this area is the renal pelvis. It's the last cavity that's inside of the kidney itself, and it contains just urine. It will not be further acted upon. Okay. This structure here is a minor calyx, whereas where two or more of them come together here, you have a major calyx. Just a name for a large tunnel, a larger tunnel. You can see the tips of these renal pyramids are coming right into the top of the minor calyx. When anything enters the minor calyx, it is urine. When it enters the major calyx, it's urine. When it enters the renal pelvis and ureter, it's urine. It's not going to change. So everything here in color, whatever color that is. Okay, now let's start with the outside here. The renal capsule, all the way around the edge. That's not labeled here. The renal capsule is a very fibrous and tough capsule that protects the kidney. Incoming, we need blood. We need blood because we need blood like any other organ does, but we also need working material, and blood has waste in it. So we want that waste. We're going to use the blood as well, the good portion of it, but the other we will try to fix. Now, the vessels inside will split. I've got one here going in between two renal pyramids. Yeah. This is an interlobar. Interlobar. Doesn't show on this picture, but I've got another picture. This is an interlobar, also can be called a lobar artery. It comes up and then arches out all the way around. And that vessel is the arcuate artery. The arcuate vein will run with it, like right here. There's no single blood cell that's going to enter the arcuate artery and take a ride all the way around. It's just going to quickly go up into one of these areas here where the nephrons are and be expelled back into the nearest vein. Okay, this is just the setup for it, however. Just don't expect that the blood has to go all the way around. The renal papilla of a pyramid is being shown here, here, here. The renal medulla from here to here, and the renal cortex from here to here. The medulla is usually thicker than the cortex is. And the renal pyramid is one of these. The renal pyramid takes up most of the medulla. The area in between renal pyramids is the renal column. That's where we trace this lobar or interlobar artery to the arcuate. This is an arcuate vein. Coming back down here, this is an interlobar or lobar vein. And this going out the renal vein. Okay. So now it's diagrammatic. You'll see the same thing, so we can go a little bit faster. Renal artery here, here. I'm looking for a lobar here, interlobar artery right here. Then the arcuate here. Now, from here, we can go up this small tree. I called it that when we talked about it before, with the side branches coming off of it. The vessel right down the center makes the tree. That is an interlobular artery. Here's where it's labeled down here, interlobular artery. And then each of the branches coming off is an afferent arteriole. I don't know that that's got labeled on this, but it will when we get to the nephron. The renal medulla, little deceptive here because it's only pointing to that point, and that's also in the renal pyramid. Okay, the renal pyramid, you don't have to know the 3 parts inside, but this is the renal pyramid. This is the renal medulla. This is the renal cortex. This is the renal capsule. And a term that's not labeled here, this indented portion of the kidney is the hilus or hilum. This is a minor calyx, a major calyx, where all the major calyces come together. We have the renal pelvis, and then out through the ureter. This takes a kidney, takes one little piece out of it, shows it over here. The separation between the medulla and the cortex is here. There's medulla, and the cortex is out here. Those little tree-like structures that I was showing you a moment ago here would be located out here. Here is a nephron. This is an interlobular artery. It's coming off of the arcuate artery. Arcuate, interlobular, and this little one is the afferent arteriole. The blood goes into a structure called Bowman's capsule and breaks up into many, many small capillaries. There's a lot of pressure moving through capillaries because they are so small. And that pressure results in some of the plasma of the blood pressing out across the endothelial wall of Bowman's capsule. Bowman's capsule is very, very thin. I'm sure we break and replace many, many of them each day. If you have high blood pressure, you have to replace them much more often. Okay, so the blood comes in from the afferent arteriole. Some of it is pressed out goes into the area outside and still within Bowman's capsule. We're going to follow it along in a moment. The rest of the blood has to go someplace. You can't just allow blood to come in forever and not pop the whole damn thing. So it goes out here through the efferent arteriole. So now we got two things to follow. Where's the plasma going? And where's the blood in the efferent arteriole going? Well, in the case of the plasma, it's following the proximal convoluted tubule. And then it will dive deep into the medulla, the descending loop of Henle. The actual loop of Henle is at the end, and then that comes back up with the ascending loop of Henle. The descending and ascending loops of Henle will be right next to each other. They don't get lost. And then out through the distal convoluted tubule to a collecting duct. Now, that would be a total waste of plasma if we didn't retain something of it. Plasma has a fairly standard composition for the blood. It's got waste products in it, and it's got good material. We want to retrieve the good material before it hits the collecting duct. So here's the role of the efferent arteriole. It spreads out, and here it's all in blue. This is the vasa recta, and it completely surrounds the descending and ascending loop, and also the very top. We call these paratubular capillaries. I didn't give you the word, and I'm not giving it to you. It surrounds all of these capillaries. And through several processes, but most notably dialysis, it retrieves the stuff from the plasma that the body can still use. And lets go out to the collecting duct the waste product, such as uric acid and urea, not the same thing. The vasa recta comes together and joins this structure here, which is an interlobular vein, counterpart interlobular artery. Come down to the arcuate vein and will now go. So it's not the purpose of the kidney to oxygenate the blood or to add anything to it or enrich it. It's only the purpose of the kidney to remove waste products. So the blood going in has waste products and good material, and the blood coming out has more proportionately of good material and less of the waste product. Okay. This is the flow I just went over, and I don't think you need to read that again. Here are some models and things which I labeled. Again, I'll go faster when I know you know it. The cortex, the medulla really should show a line this big. Here's a lobar artery. I also call it interlobar artery. Here's the arcuate artery and vein here. Here's the interlobular artery. I did not label the afferent arteriole, but it would be right here, here, here. The renal artery in, renal vein, renal pelvis, a major calyx. Here are two minor calyces. Here are two better looking minor calyces. And here's a model of a nephron. Okay. Half of it looks like the schematic that you find in a Heath kit, a little kit that kids used to buy. I used to, to build miniature radios and stuff. Well, this schematic over here, the first thing we can really get out of the way is the arcuate artery and arcuate vein. Coming to them is the lobar artery, and coming away is the lobar vein. So lobar artery, arcuate, immediately up. We're not taking the right around. This is the interlobular artery. Here's an afferent arteriole, and it goes into Bowman's capsule. Bowman's capsule is pinpointed up here. I think it's sort of a lime green or something here. Inside, the capillaries that have formed are called the glomerulus. Here's where the separation between plasma, which will go this way, takes place, and the rest of the blood, which will be in this vessel, the efferent arteriole. The plasma goes through the proximal convoluted tubule, descending Lupe-Henle. Now, it's always called descending Lupe-Henle, but if you look at a picture of the kidney, some of them are actually going this way. So I don't know why they call it descending. It's going more towards the center. Anyway, descending Lupe-Henle, ascending Lupe-Henle, distal convoluted tubule, and out into the collecting duct. The collecting duct does nothing. Urine is collected in the collecting duct. Nothing further is done with it except to transport it. The efferent arteriole branches out all over, becoming the vasa recta, retrieving the good portions of the plasma and taking it back out here to the interlobular vein, arcuate vein, lobar vein. Okay, I said I wanted to quickly come back and see if I got all these terms. Hilus, yes, indented portion, cortex, medulla, pyramids, ureter, renal pelvis, major and minor calyx, interlobular artery. Let's see. Okay, I believe I got them all. Now, if you have any questions.
Thank you, Charlie.
Okay.
Charlie?
Yeah.
Do you have to differentiate between the arcuate and interlobular arteries and veins?
When you say differentiate, do you mean on a practical exam or a written exam? On a written exam, you would. On a written exam, you would.
So like the arcuate is like the one that runs through between the renal pyramids, I think.
It doesn't run between them. That's the interlobar. It runs across in between the medulla and the cortex. It sort of makes arches. That's how I remember it. Arc and arches.
Okay, so the arcuate is like the one that runs through the cortex then?
Through the what? Through the cortex?
Yes.
No, it separates the cortex from the medulla.
Okay,
on
cool.
one side is the cortex. The other side is the medulla.
And then the interlobular is the one that runs through the pyramids?
No,
Oh.
the interlobular is the one that runs up and nephrons come off it. The little one, most very small when it runs up, and then the afferent arteriole comes off and goes into the glomerulus. You look at the diagrams, the pictures are clear. And the reading I was just skipping through a moment ago. I skipped through it mainly to see that I had done it. But here's our interlobular artery. Oh, it's also called cortical radiate, but you don't need to know that. But
So Charlie, for this test coming up,
yes,
are we just basically gonna need, we're not gonna see like a diagram or anything and label it, because that's more like a practicum, right?
no, you're going to have a diagram. I put a diagram on every lecture test. I put a
Okay.
diagram on the bone practicum, remember?
Yeah, I remember that. I was wondering for this upcoming test, is it gonna be more like we need to know the definitions of each thing, or more like both, like the definitions and the location on a diagram?
Yes, you need to know that. Now, as far as the diagram is concerned, what would be something we covered in this section? I haven't reviewed it yet. That'll happen on Monday. The heart, when we did the heart. I could put that diagram on the board, one that I did. If you want to take a look at the diagram again on, hang on.
And would we like label it for part of
Here,
our lecture exam?
okay, you see this one?
No, you're not screen sharing.
Oh, I'm not. Oh, okay. Well, I showed you a chalkboard drawing.
Yeah, I
just
saw
a
that.
moment. Okay, now everybody should be able to see it.
Yeah.
Okay. Not a very artistic drawing, but it names all the different parts that we talked about. Okay. You of course used cut and paste for the most part. And if I can find good cut and paste, that'd be great, but that's always labeled. So I need unlabeled. So I need to make one for myself. But what I would do, I'm not going to ask you all this stuff, of course not. But if I want these structures, for instance, I would put say we're on number 60, and then you would pick out the appropriate answer from a list of answers. And they have letters A, B, C, D, and E, and click it just like you do any other test. Okay, then it goes on 61 on the same diagram. But what I do actually is I reproduce the diagram. Don't put in the number 60. Put in another one like this one up here. And the correct answer here is left auricle. Okay, if it's a question that is kind of a little tougher or iffy, I might say, for instance, this one that I started with. This is the left ventricle, is what I'm looking for. But you may think, oh, that's the location of the trabeculae carneae. And somebody's scratching their head right now saying, what's trabeculae carneae? Got to study. I would say, name this chamber of the heart.
Okay, and this could be on the lecture exam, not the practicum, right?
This could be on the lecture exam.
Okay.
And I'm telling you this, you look through the lecture material pages, okay, those that say lecture, rather than lab. There'll be plenty of this in lab too, but on the lecture pages, it defines artery and arterial and capillary, and as I said earlier, elastic artery, muscular artery, and then I went to the parts of the heart, and it's in the lecture. So if it's in the lecture, you're responsible for it.
Yeah, so all the lecture pages, like we need to know that front to back. Like we really need to study that.
I'm glad that you said it because that's what I was about to say. You need
Yeah.
it front to back. You need it backwards and forwards. You need to say it one way. You need to say it another way. This is the left ventricle, uh, for instance. And how could you say it another way? I don't know if I can on that one. This is the largest chamber of the heart. Okay. That's two ways of talking about that chamber. Yeah, so front to back, backwards and forwards. Okay, we've had a long time. We've had a long time, and I'm not including a lot of stuff that we've had since. Nothing on the nervous system is going to be there. Nothing on the integumentary system is going to be there. Okay.
Yeah, and then we look over our chapter outlines too, but mostly the main part we need to study is more the lecture material.
That's absolutely correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.